Boys, another podcast. How you all doing?
Man.
Wonderful. 10 out of 10.
Again, I'm so grateful for our followers and supporters. We've had so many awesome questions. Like when they were rolling in, I was like, these are awesome. These are so good. So there's a lot of them. We're going to try to get through as many as possible. There's some questions that have already been answered in previous podcasts. So I might run through and say, hey guys, watch this podcast, listen to this podcast, so we know that your question has been answered. We have not just skipping over it. But I'm super pumped. I'm ready to go. So I've kind of categorized them again. Comp prep questions, nutrition questions, some personal questions, and I'm just going to let it roll and do our thing. But how's everyone going? Is everyone having a good week so far?
Yeah, man. I suppose we're probably more interested in you, as we spoke a little bit off air, and Scotty said, we just want to know everything that's happening for microtromboli at the moment. But man, personally, I'm in a great place at the moment, man. I spoke about it on the last podcast. Recovered. I feel I'm growing like a weed. I feel like my composition's getting better over the last 2 weeks. My energy's through the roof. I'm hitting overload on every session. I'm never been so focused. So I'm in a very good spot.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, things with me are good, man. Just, again, I don't really have much to report. It's pretty simplistic. It's just rinse and repeat. Everything's good, though. I can't complain. But I, as MGs, and I'm sure everyone else that's watching this is more interested in how you're going, because obviously when we're on the sidelines in the off-season, we're living vicariously through you, bro. So give us a rundown. How's the week been?
Yeah, it's been really good. Like, you know me, guys, like I'm so positive about this whole process and I'm just loving every bit of it. Again, not hiding, feeling all the general prep feels, but it's what I signed up for, and I just move on with life and just keep executing, getting it done. But last week I had two refeeds and responded really, really well, but weight did come up and then came back down. So I hit a new low last week at the start of the week, had the two refeeds midweek, then weight came up, did eventually come down to a new low again. And then at the start of this week, weight just came up a little bit, like we're talking like half a kilo, and then had one refeed this week, and weight shot all the way up. Like we're talking like over a kilo, kilo and a half. And then the day after the refeed, I lost like 1.6 kilo to a new low.
So the day after, so say your refeed was on a Wednesday, you had the new low on the Friday or the Thursday?
No, so had the refeed Wednesday. Thursday was my heaviest weight. Like I was all the way back up. And then today's Friday, and then it just came back straight back down to a new low, 1.6 kg down. So body responded, sucked back down, and yeah, feeling good, man. Feeling really good. And
what about the look? Were you guys assessing the look in terms of potentially using it as a bit of a trial for peak week? So like, did you send photos post the next day or anything like that?
Yeah, so I normally try to give him some bonus footage, after a refeed or just before. So I did make sure I took some photos before and after. And also you can see my body weight trends and how I'm feeling and how I'm looking. What's funny is you kind of, when you know your body, you know how it reacts. And when you're in tune with it, you know when you're going to hit a low and you know when you're going to be heavy. Like I knew I was going to be heavy when I jumped on the scales. Like I'm going to be way up. Like I can just feel it in the body. But not physically look. Like physically look, I looked great. But I was like, I'm going to be heavy. I know this, right? And then when I jumped on the scales this morning, I was like, I'm going to be light. I don't know how light, but I'm going to be light. And I could see in my physique that I flattened out a little bit, but I was super tight because I practice my posing in the morning. And I had a look at myself and I was like, ooh, and I normally want to jump on the scales just after posing. And I had a look, I was like, oh, I'm going to be light. And I was a new low. And I was like, yeah, there it is. That's what we're here for. So,
yeah, great. And so in terms of the refeed versus everyday macros, how much more carbohydrate are you consuming? I'm assuming that it's carbohydrate that goes up on the refeed day. How much more carbohydrate are you taking in on that day?
yeah, so not to give you exact numbers because people are going to try to experiment with these exact numbers, but just to give you an example, so protein will come down a little bit, like 30 grams. Fats will go up a little bit, like 10, 15 grams. And then carbs went up over double, maybe close to 3 times.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And I guess for those people that are watching, that rationale behind that would be, people will be like, why would you be consuming a little bit less protein? So protein obviously is, in terms of how we partition it, it's going to take a little bit longer to digest. And obviously when carbohydrate is going in, we want to be able to take on that carbohydrate and obviously store it as optimally as possible. So therefore it makes sense to pull back a little bit of protein. And then I guess people will be like, well, fat, slow digestion, so why would you want to do that? I'm guessing the rationale would probably be to essentially help them stick, because if you're only running one refeed or something, and you know that perhaps it's going to be an aggressive week of dieting, sometimes a little bit of extra fats helps that carbohydrate stick a little bit, which is probably also why the weight potentially jumped as high as it did. But then for people that would have a refeed and stress, this is a perfect example in terms of understanding why your body reacts the way it does. So firstly, nutrient partitioning as a natural is always going to be garbage at the back end of prep, especially because we don't have access to certain pharmacology to help aid that. But when you're taking on 2, or in your case 3 times the amount of carbohydrate, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that food volume was higher.
Yeah, definitely. I try to eat the same.
For sure, but you're eating pumpkin, potato, whatnot.
Yeah.
So, for example, that food has to go somewhere. So if you don't have a bowel movement straight away, that's sitting in the small intestine or your large intestine at that point. And so that is just weight that you've taken on. But also, again, you need to look at it physiologically. We're looking at, around 3 mils of water per gram of carbohydrate that you're taking in. So you've probably got 800 grams or 800 mils, I should say, to a liter in water. Then you've got food volume, and that's probably where the scale weight.
And even potentially, a little bit more food volume, a little bit more sodium,
more fiber.
Water's going to follow. So exactly. They're all factors of the increased weight.
For sure. And I was going to say, and that's, it's a real positive. Like, I'm sure you and Brandon would have been wrapped, because obviously when you're at the back end of prep, when you've got someone and you're digging, it's, again, MG, you're talking about where you're looking to see whether this was a physique that you're looking at in terms from a peaking perspective. You want to see how your body responds. So when you're sucking someone down super low, you want to make sure that when you push in a certain amount of carbohydrate, that you get the response you want. So you would know that obviously the system you guys are employing is working very well, because bang, pushing carbohydrate, body responds really, really well. And then within 48 hours, you're back to baseline. Yeah. And again, it just shows that food clears out, water clears out, and we're back where we need to be. So that all sounds like, really, really positive.
Yeah. And it's something that I'm actually doing with all of my clients at the moment is, practicing those refeeds, actually telling them specific foods to eat to see how their body reacts. And sometimes it's a luxury to be able to do that. And sometimes people don't have the ability to do that because they've still got to lose and really trim down a little bit more. But, being in a good position where I can experiment with myself for my own prep, but then also with other people's preps is a really, really good a good way of approaching it before you hit the show, so you know what you're doing.
And do you take on, again, I'm assuming that you would, do you take on a little bit more sodium on the day that you are obviously pushing in that carbohydrate as well, or you just keep it the same?
Maybe just only because the food's a little bit more. So
there's more on the plate to cover.
That makes sense. And I love my salt, so I'm probably to be honest. Yeah.
And fluid stays the same, or again a little bit more water?
Probably a bit more because I'm just a bit more thirstier. I'm just trying to get the food down a little bit more. But we're talking maybe maybe an extra liter.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
no, that's good. I think that's really insightful and probably good for people, especially if you're someone who doesn't have a coach and you're running your own shop in that regard. All that sort of stuff, because I feel like there's so much misinformation. People associate refeeds with, if your weight goes up, that's a bad thing, versus it being a good thing, and also the effects that it has on NEAT as a result as well, which you probably had, we spoke a little bit off air about that the next day without you even realizing. Miscellaneous movement just goes up.
Yeah, so what we did is we actually reduced my step goal for that day of my refeeds, kind of to give back to the system a little bit. But I overreached that step goal just not even trying.
Yeah.
And
that's something I remember vividly, Michael Galanti, when we were together, I used to have to be like, bro, I need you to just like in your sessions, sit down, man. Stop walking. You know, at the back end, you were probably 3 down, 4 up. You're spending more time at maintenance because you had time to eat up. And that was something that we had to be really mindful of, because without realizing, you just upregulate everything, because all of a sudden you've got food and you've got
man, but I would massively upregulate, man. I would find 5,000 steps without realizing it on my, my days where the nutrition system was a lot higher. So it wasn't like a minor, upregulation. It was a massive chunk. And I just, no matter what I did, man, I felt like I was sitting down more than ever because you were telling me to, but I was still accumulating the numbers. It was just, it's amazing what a little bit of extra energy can do.
Cool. Exciting, man.
Yeah. So what are we? It'll be 3 weeks out tomorrow.
21 days tomorrow.
3 weeks.
So this time in 3 weeks, I'm assuming we'll still be doing the pod, but you'll probably have at least 1, maybe 2 coats of tan on.
Yeah, I think we're going to be doing a pod, and I'm going to be like tanned up, which will be fun.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
It'll be fun. So people will have to listen to that one on YouTube and not Spotify, but if they want to see my fake tan. All right, let's move to some questions. Let's start digging through this. So let's just start with this one because we're talking about prep. So let's just start with some prep ones. Maintaining comp leanness. Is there a way of finding a calorie sweet spot so we can maintain some of our comp leanness post-comp?
I reckon the first thing that I would say to this is, why would you want to? And the answer to the question, without getting into detail, is like, before we break it down, is could you? Sure, you absolutely could. But at what sacrifice? Like, why would you want to stay that lean? Let's think of the things that are going to be, performance. If we're trying to improve and get better, performance is going to go down. Energy levels, mood, libido, just to name a few. So could you? Yeah, you could, but I just don't know why you would want to, unless you have a goal of or you need to stay that lean all year round because potentially it's something that's going to earn you an income if you do photo shoots or you're a performer or something like that. But to answer the question, I say you can, but I just don't see why you'd want to.
Scotty, give us the technical answer, if it can technically be done, and how it would technically be done.
Firstly, I think it's that you need to look at the context. Like, are we talking about Michael Trimboli, or are we talking about a bikini competitor? Because, because for example, if you're a bikini competitor, and again, no disrespect to bikini competitors, but their requirements for conditioning are always going to be obviously less than classic physique or a bodybuilder or any of the male divisions or a female fitness. So I think if you're a female bikini girl, she might have got into wicked shape. And then, you know what, I want to try and hold on to as much of this as I can. I guess it would depend on where baseline intakes are, how much metabolic adaptation they have come across. And typically most bikini girls, unless they've really had to dig to get there, they're probably not going to be a candidate for a recovery diet because, hormonally they're probably still intact. Hopefully food hasn't been pushed that aggressive, and they're in a position where if they want to, they can sustain that. But that's probably the exception to the rule, because pretty much every other division is going to require pretty substantial levels of conditioning. And so as we sort of spoke about before, you've got to look at the recoil of that. So yes, you look phenomenal, you're shredded, but if you were to have a pros and a cons column, the cons in terms of day-to-day life, and forget from a health perspective, are going to far outweigh the positives, which is just that you look good. Like, you look good when you're in the gym, but for every other hour of the day, you're going to be suffering, you're going to be hurting, and essentially you can't sustain that level of conditioning without, at some point, there's going to be some recoil and you'll fall into a screaming heap. So you're much better off employing a recovery diet where you can attenuate some of those diet-related adaptations. So, put on a few kilos initially, and then you can increase a slower rate of gain. But hormonally, if you're super shredded, like, there's going to be some recoil, not just, especially for females, to the menstrual cycle as well. But you've got to look at what do you place more emphasis on, like being a healthy, happy human being versus just looking good, when you're training in the gym. And to give some context, all those people that you see on Instagram or on YouTube that are just in phenomenal shape all year round, a lot of them are going to be enhanced. So they have access to pharmacology that allows them to still look grouse and not potentially have to suffer like a natural would. But even those that do, behind closed doors, they're probably miserable. And at some point, all of them will fall off a cliff in that regard, and they'll fall into a screaming heat where they'll have a binge, or they'll just get really, really, really out of shape. They'll get fat, and then they end up depressed and miserable, when really you're better off just, again, understanding that contest prep, essentially, it's not overly healthy to get super, super shredded, but it's not designed to be something that we're going to do forever. We want to always use the analogy, we want to get in, and then we want to get out. You know, you can, as a guy, you can hang out at 12% body fat in the off season if you feel okay. But some people need to be at like 20 or 25 to just feel good and to train hard. So I think you need to look at all of those other biomarkers. But essentially, can you do it? Is it physically possible? Yes, but there's always going to be an end destination, and there's going to be a time frame where you'll come to a point where you just can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
Eventually, the level of conditioning and the recoil that comes with it, it will always get you. It doesn't matter who you are. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah. So practically it can be done, you know, going to a show you're in a deficient, and then so if you wanted to maintain that look and that weight, you have to come to a maintenance, which means maybe a little bit more food that you're on because you're in a deficient, and probably a little bit more food and a little bit less output, so steps activity, and then you could potentially maintain, but it's not maintainable or sustainable. So technically, yes, it can be done, and that's how you would do it. You'd probably bring food up just a little bit until you get to maintenance, and activity, a little bit less activity to bring you to maintenance. You could probably maintain a physique, but whether that is maintainable and sustainable is definitely questionable, and eventually there'll become a point where it's just not worth the squeeze.
Yeah, and
Definitely.
I think the level of adherence needed to maintain that type of maintenance or deficit when you don't have a goal like a stage and a date,
Yeah,
will wear most people down, right? And you
what's your
probably
driving force?
like,
Yeah.
Yeah, and as a female, I think as well, you need to be mindful. It's the endocrinological effects that it has on your body. Like one of the conversations, and I'm sure you guys probably do it with your females, when I first work with someone, if they're going to do fitness or figure or something, it's going to require them to get really lean. Like I'll ask you, if they're a little bit older, do you have any plans in the near future to maybe like start a family, have a baby? Because getting you this lean, there's also the possibility that you may not get your cycle back for X amount of time, and it may elongate the process for you to be able to have a baby. If you want to have a baby as soon as you finish prep, I'm not saying that you can't. Some people can do that, but there's also on the other side that some people, they just need to be in a basically baseline body composition that they were before prep, and they need to be in that position without a deficit for like 6-12 months. So everyone's going to be uniquely different in that sense. So there are also things I think that you need to, and again, it comes down to, in the scheme of things, like what's really going to be important here. So they're things that you would probably need to consider as well.
All right, let's move on to the next one now. We spoke about my kind of refeeds and practicing carb ups and stuff. Got an interesting question. Thoughts on dirty backload night before or morning of a show day? I've seen this a lot in IFBB and WBFF. So dirty backload, from what I think a dirty backload is like just eating junk food the day before.
And maybe a bit of the, has everyone seen the Nathan D'Asher 2 shots of vodka the night before stage with a burger?
No, I haven't seen it, but that would be the context of what this person is asking. So anyone heard of it? Anyone know reasons why it would even work and what the method behind it would be? Maybe Scotty?
I don't think we see a lot of it as naturals. Well, at least I don't. I can't remember the last time I saw someone sort of doing that at a show. I think we probably see more of it on YouTube, because a lot of the top IFBB guys tend to do that. Even like backstage, I remember you used to see like Dexter Jackson, all those guys, they're eating potato chips.
Yeah,
they've got pizzas, burgers before they're about to go on. Whereas as a natural, if you did that, you'd probably shit your pants before you even get to stage. But not just that, the stomach distension that you would have, you would just be like so bloated. but I feel like there's misinformation because they see those guys do that they think maybe, I don't know if that's their rationale, because there's someone that they see who does that and they just assume they will respond the same way. But again, the people that look or that still do that perhaps and look phenomenally, it's probably just that they're just A, a genetic freak, and B, they just respond really well to drugs.
Yeah, and a lot of these guys are stepping on stage 120 kilos plus. So if you look at the calories required for somebody with that much lean muscle tissue, potentially a big carb up is just going to take too long, and they're going to have to eat too much. It's just easier to get 30 calories in. But again, you're looking at people that have got, insane amounts of lean body mass.
For sure. But I mean, even then, like, in terms of filling up a physique, there's only a real small amount of intramuscular triglycerides that we can actually store. So putting in shitloads of fat, logically, it doesn't make, like, for me, it just doesn't make any sense. Whereas carbohydrate is obviously where, and most of the time these guys, if they're dieting on lower food, if you're pushing in, like some of these guys in the opens, they'll push in like 1,600 to 2,000 grams of carbohydrate the day before, which, they can probably tolerate that. But and I get, you might need to increase some fat so that they stick, but burgers and shit like that, the chances are, and also those foods are going to come with an enormous amount of sodium. And most of these guys are also, as they're doing that, they're not consuming water, which is also, again, logically, even if you are using drugs, it doesn't make any sense at all, because you need water to be able to shuttle that carbohydrate to go where you want it to go. So if you're not consuming water, then essentially your body's just going to take it from inside the cell and take it and stick it in that interstitial layer, which is exactly where you don't want it to be. So it doesn't make any sense at all to me. And I think those that are able to perhaps get away with it, they're probably just one in 100,000 that respond, or 100 million, whatever it is, that are just a freak, that just are genetically able to do that, and without knowing what their drugs that they're taking are. But that probably is also contributing, and they just obviously respond really, really well. But if you had 1,000 naturals that employed that protocol, I would be comfortable in saying that at least 999 of them would not respond well. And I don't even reckon that the 1,000th person would either, but I'm just going to say that just to cover it.
And Scotty, there'd be a lot of shit on stage.
Man, about it. Yeah, it would be rank in that room. As it is, when you're consuming lots of protein, there's normally a bit of GI distress. Sometimes there's a lot of bowel movements that go on, but consuming that pre-show, it wouldn't be a nice environment, I don't think.
So put it this way. The question was asked, and they might be doing it, but are they looking like garbage I showed on the stage? So if you're looking like garbage, it didn't work, did it? But okay, let's just devil's advocate, right? So let's just pretend that it's a small female athlete, right, that is doing this, and they do it the day before or the day of, and they look fucking incredible. Like, it works. Why does it work? Okay, so there's my two trains of thought. One is they were already on a high amount of food, and their body can take that food in and digest it. Yeah. So they're already on a great amount of calories, macros. Even if they did it, junk food, it's probably going to end up being the same as what they're having with clean food from a calories and macros perspective. Could be that. That could be the case. So therefore, their body just takes it in like it would take in all their other food they've been taking in, because they've got a good metabolism on a high level.
Yeah.
Well done. Congratulations. You can get away with it. The other school of thought would be is they were dieted down so much and so depleted that, and they didn't carb up properly. Maybe they didn't do a carb up at all, and they're relying on taking in all this food to fill them out. It magically works for them because they were so depleted and they need to fill out, and it made them look great, and they have a good digestive system that could handle it. Bingo. Congratulations. You looked amazing. Probably not going to work for everyone. And that's probably only two scenarios where I'd feel like...
And a risky game to play.
Would I risk it? Never. I would never risk it unless I didn't really care about the result. And, hey, let's just do this for shits and giggles because I have 5 other shows that I'm going to be peaking for, and let's just see what happens at this one. So did they look good doing it? Let's just say yes. let's just say they were a small female, and that would be the two scenarios I think that would actually work.
But essentially, it's a horrendous idea. And I think
100%.
if you look at some of the opens, and I think there's still probably a lot of Maddie would probably be able to give some insight on this, but there's a few opens that I wouldn't name names, but I have seen people, and it looks like they have ridiculous stomach distension. They look watery. They potentially probably fucked their whole physique purely because they followed an old school bro. Ronnie used to have vodka and he'd eat a pizza the night before. He's also like 1 in 100 million. He's a freak of nature.
Yeah.
That somehow that just worked, and whatever drugs he was taking, it responded well. But I would say that 99.9% of people that go down that path will not respond favorably.
Yeah. All right. So that's a comp related question moving into comp. Mm-hmm. Then we had some post-comp questions. So one, and actually we've covered these. So one was about reverse dieting and how we go about reverse dieting, the protocol for reverse dieting. That's been definitely covered in multiple podcasts in the past. So have a look at those ones, guys. Have a look at the description in those podcasts. It will mention in there that it's been covered.
That was one of the first couple of that one.
About binge eating post-comp. We actually spoke about this one in the last podcast. So those ones are ticked off, and those ones have definitely been done, guys. So have a look at those. Coming into comp, one person asked is, when should I cut artificial sweeteners out of my diet for my comp?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll tell you, like, my opinion of it, and I understand, like, it's a super common thing, and I know why. I think I understand why a lot of coaches cut it out, because they want to eliminate the risk of causing any GI stress when you're coming into show day, you know, any stomach distension like Scotty was talking about before. I'm not too big on pulling artificial sweeteners out really right up until show day, because if someone's stomached them for 26 weeks and has been ready, you know, 3 weeks out, you know, they're stage ready, and you're just kind of going back up to maintenance, I don't see any reason why the body would now say, I'm going to have a reaction. Like it knows, your stomach knows that the show's 3 days away. It's like, aha, I'm going to fuck you over now. You put that artificial sweetener in me, I'm going to cause you gas, bloating. So I think that the answer is it gets pulled out to avoid GI stress. If it's being pulled out for any other reason, I can't really see any methodology as to why it would be. Personally, I don't see a need for it to be pulled out if it's been handled the whole prep. And let's be real, for most people, the whole off season too, you know, if you're drinking, you know, Coke Zero pretty much all year round, I know I do, Chimbolo, I know you do. I don't think 3 days out from your show, it's going to start to cause you stress then if you've been able to handle it for 52 weeks. So I think sometimes it gets done because, you know, it's the cool thing, and coaches have been pulling out artificial sweeteners forever. I think if it's something that you've had the whole way through, it's totally fine. Would I be adding in new things? No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't add a new artificial sweetener, but if it's something that you've stomached all year round, it's fine to stay right up until show day.
For me, I think it depends on how much you're having. And also too is the way I run my preps, and you guys are probably the same, is we don't have a lot of artificially sweetened foods that we recommend to people, only because of, as we said before in other podcasts, is if you're having too much sweet and tasty stuff, you're probably going to fall into a binge, right? And your other foods that you're having majority of your diet are going to feel bland and crap, and all you're going to want is your macro mic shit that you're having, you know, once a day or every second day and things like that, and eventually you'll binge. And then the next thing is we don't have a lot of that kind of food in our diet too, because they have all the sugar, alcohols, and all the other crap that we're trying to avoid in our prep. So if we're doing all the things right and we're not utilizing a lot of artificial sweetness because of all those reasons we just explained and we've spoken about in the past, then coming into a prep or towards the end of a prep or into peak week, you're probably not having many artificial sweeteners. Maybe you're having 1 or 2 Coke Zeros a day, and maybe an artificial sweetener in your coffee, and maybe you're having some low-cal sauce, whatever that may be, has some artificial sweeteners. So you're probably not loading up a lot on them anyways if you're doing it in that method that we kind of recommend. So then cutting them out is probably not going to make a hell of a lot of difference. But to be honest, what I tend to do is I tend to try to reduce them a couple of days before as a just in case, if it's causing any issues, if there's a little 1% of bloating we can reduce or fluid retention we can reduce. And think about it, when you're going into the show, you're probably feeding people up. So they don't need the use of artificial sweeteners in some of their food because they're probably having real food. They're probably having not the light sweetened chili sauce that Scotty's having. They're probably having the real shit. So you probably inherently cut them out anyways because you can have the real stuff.
Yeah.
I
think what a lot of people are saying, like, you know, I've seen this before from other people, is like 4 days out, stop your Coke Zero, the one that you were having a day.
Yeah.
So
I think both of you guys are right. I think if you've been having it for the entire prep, the only exception to that rule is if you're having that stupid fucking Fit Lardo ice cream or
you fucking hate that.
or protein bars. I don't. Any of my athletes, everyone knows that I'm an advocate of following a structured meal plan. But even then, if they were flexible dieting, I'd be like, you just don't want to be eating that anyway, mainly because, as we said, the sugar alcohols. But, I mean, the only real artificial sweeteners that you're probably going to be having, as you said, is maybe a sweetener in your coffee or a diet caffeinated beverage or something like that. So Monster Energy and things like that, I would say you're probably going to pull that 3 days out because there are some sugar alcohols there. Coke Zero, not really. If you've been having 2 of them a day, I would just say the day before the show, don't have 2, just have 1, and don't have it late at night when you're going to go to bed because typically it does bloat us because carbonated water helps us stay full. And then obviously you're not going to have that on show day, but you'd never introduce random foods the week of your show, let alone like a few days before. But I think if you want to remove them, then that's fine. But I think if you're having lots of artificial sweeteners at the back end, you're probably not managing things correctly. You don't really want to be eating heaps of highly palatable food when you're at that like real fragile state where you're really close to the finish line. You're super lean. You know, why would you risk putting yourself in a situation that could potentially lead to you shitting all over, 24 or 30 weeks of work? So
yeah, definitely. Okay, next one was answered already in a previous podcast. How low do your calories go in prep? I think literally the podcast title has that in it. So whoever asked that question, go to that podcast title. It is definitely in there. A little bit of a change of pace, but still comp prep related. We had 2 questions surrounding this. Do your partners find it difficult when you're in prep? Does it change the relationship? And another question that was similar was, how do you handle relationships when in prep? Both married, friendships, when other parties really don't get it. So I might get you guys to talk about it because you're the guys that are in a relationship and both prep, and then I'll have my 2 cents.
I'll start like just speaking from personal experience that getting into a prep and thinking that it's not going to affect your partner is probably being a little bit naive. It's undoubtable that prep is going to affect your relationship. What sort of things can you expect? Well, the ability to go out to restaurants or functions, and we've spoken about this 100 times. It's these things can still be done, but you just need to plan and prepare better. Meave knows that whenever I choose to do a show, what the next 6 months are going to look like, and there's going to be some certain things that we can't do. I think just the ability to go out together. We don't miss any functions, we don't miss any birthdays or catch-ups with friends or anything like that. But I may show up at a later time. If they're going for dinner, I might show up after for coffee and things like that. But, the one thing that is definitely sacrificed is the ability for, the 2 of us to go out together and sit at a restaurant and have a meal. But that's definitely a discussion we have before we start the process. The other part to it is she's very understanding, one, how important it is to me, how much I love it, the passion that I have for it. But it's also only once every 2 to 3 years. So that's kind of, something that we agreed to. I certainly wouldn't want to jump into a prep without having had a very lengthy discussion with a partner. If you're someone who is considering competing, you definitely want to have your partner on board before you start, because there are going to be times when, unfortunately, they are going to have to miss out on things. Scott, I'm sure you're in the exact same boat, and yours is a little bit different, and I'll be interested to get your thoughts because you've obviously got children, which we don't, which adds a whole nother aspect to this thing, right? Prepping with kids, and I'm sure there's a lot of listeners who follow us who are mums that compete with children and dads who compete with children. So I'd be interested to get your thoughts on, what sort of sacrifices are made on that side.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I've done it from your side. I've done a prep without kids. So before Jen and I, we were still married, but we didn't have kids then. And it's so much easier because you can be so much more selfish in the sense that you're worrying about yourself and then your partner. You don't have anyone else. You know, there's no little people to then sort of be mindful of. But as you said, I think it's really important. You got to have a discussion prior to going into it. Like, perfect example. We actually, my wife and I, Jen, we had a bit of a chat about it the other night about my plans for 2023 and what it would look like, and how I plan to manage my commitments to still be, you know, the most optimal athlete that I can, but at the same time, making sure that she still knows that that's not my number one priority. My kids are my number one priority as well as what she is. So I think as well, just them knowing that this is something that I'm doing, but it's not like this is all I care about, because it can become a little bit like that, especially when you're in the back end of it. You know, it can feel like it's just, I get like that. It's tunnel vision, and it probably is a little bit all you focus on, but it isn't everything and anything. So it's just something that you're doing. So I think having that transparency early on is important. Again, similar to me, Jenny's very understanding. She knows that this is what I do and this is something that I love, and it wouldn't be like, she's not the sort of person to begrudge me for doing something just as though I wouldn't do that to her. So I think they're things they're qualities in a partner that you'd want to have, especially if you're going to commit to being to that person for the rest of your life. So I'm very fortunate in that regard. But with kids, it's very different, because especially when you've got little children, you could be tired, hungry, whatever. They might wake up at 6 a.m. They don't give a shit whether you're tired or whether you've got to train at this time. You know, you're their dad, or you're their mum. And so again, that always should be the number one priority. But is it harder? Absolutely, it definitely is. I think you just have to be super organized. So I'm very structured in terms of when I train. From Monday to Saturday, the days that I'm training, there's 5 days in that I'll train. The time frame that I will train will be the same every single week. So it's like I have a 9 to 5, but it's more like 5 till sort of 7. And every hour is allocated time. So when I'm at home with my kids, then I'm a dad. When I'm at the gym and I'm training, I'm Scott, an athlete. When I'm coaching my clients, I've got my coaching hat on. So I feel like you wear many hats as a parent who competes. So I think as long as you continue to prioritize that, and again, the biggest thing that we've always said is, I know for me, I never want what I'm doing to influence anyone else. And every time you prep, I feel like you get a little bit better at it. But I know one of my biggest goals for my prep next year is I want to be able to manage it better, and for Jen to feel like, my kids wouldn't have noticed at all the last time I did. But now that they're getting a little bit older, I would want to make sure that I'm conducting myself better. I'm still being a good husband. I'm still being a good dad. And I think it's important to check in. Like we would normally check in every week or every 2 weeks just to see, like, how's everything going? How am I going? Like, am I a little bit more prickly? Is there things that maybe I need to be aware of? Because I think if you don't have that open dialogue, then potentially things can build up. And especially, and this is, no one really talks about this, but I mean, as someone that has a partner, it can, and I've seen this with my own clients, it can place stress on a relationship, because as you get super lean, you lose your libido. So if you're a girl, you're getting into fantastic shape. If you're a guy, same thing, and you're getting super lean. And so you're potentially also getting a little bit more attention externally from everyone around. Oh my God, you look great. But you're perhaps not being physically intimate with your partner, because it's not that you don't find them attractive. You just have no desire physically to be able to do that. And that's just, it's a recoil of being super lean. Like, that's a physiological process of when you're shredded, you don't have any desire to have sex. Well, at least I know when I'm super shredded, I don't. MG, you're probably the same, I'm guessing.
Oh man, like, yeah, it's definitely, and it's something that we spoke about, and we brought to light, because it certainly made it easier to deal with when you get home and you just want to go to bed. But to bring it to light and have an understanding between you, I think something that's really, really important. Not just sweep it under the rug.
And it's important that they understand that the reason that I physically, like, you physically can, but the desire to want to is going to be different, because you have less body fat, you have less testosterone. So it's got nothing to do with them. You still love them. You still find them attractive, all those things. Because sometimes that can place strain, you know, on the relationship in that sense. Like, obviously, we're mentally bound together. We also, the physicality side of it plays a role. So I think as long as they understand that, and again, I think it's easier each time you prep because they know this is probably the stage where they're going to be at their most fragile 4, you know, weeks out from a show. And then I know that as soon as the show's done, blah, 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 food's going to go up. They're going to start to feel better. And then in terms of everything to do outside of bodybuilding, it's going to get linearly better because they're going to feel better. They're going to have more fat mass. And, you know, the norm basically comes back to life. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's pretty similar for female athletes. You know, we're talking from a male point of view, but, I have very open dialogue with all my athletes. And, the female athlete is very prone to losing libido too, being at a low level body fat. So it goes both ways, definitely. But I think, talking about it and having an understanding between your partner is super important. I think one of the things that I've had a lot of feedback about this week just this morning, I spoke to 2 female athletes who are going through this, and we've touched on this in another podcast, but is not necessarily the non-supportive partner, but absolutely the non-supportive family, whether that be their own parents or whether that be in-laws, uncles, aunties, that type of thing. I think that seems to be a lot more common in the competitive scene today. But we have spoken about how to deal with that in a previous episode, which will also be in the title. But is that something that you guys both see as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, we've touched on that point about people not understanding the process and what we're going through and not being in the same mindset of us. Having someone that's a partner, though, obviously they're going to be a little bit more impacted than maybe just someone that you see once in a while or whatever that may be. And as I kind of said before, it's about having a discussion, making them understand the process that you're going through. And personally, you're going to probably feel a little bit more, obviously you said less energy, but a little more irritable too, a little bit less patient, to be honest. And you just need to relay that back to your partner. And if you feel like you have done that to them, just apologize and just be like, I'm sorry, but I'm at this point where I'm just a little bit more irritable. I just got a little bit short temper and things like that. And just be honest and be open and just be apologetic if you feel you need to. But you know what? I think I said in another podcast too is this will test a relationship and will test the maturity of that other person if they've ever need to sacrifice for someone else, right? Because if you can't go through a prep and that person's never sacrificed because they're in their 20s, they've done whatever they wanted to do for their whole life, they've always come and go of their pleas, they've never had to do anything for anyone else, and now they've got to sacrifice for a partner and not be social and not go out and miss out on things for their partner's goals and dreams. If they can't do that for you, you're going to be going through harder stuff in life than a prep with your partner, for sure. So sometimes I've found that people may reevaluate their relationship, and they might do it after a prep and reflect and see that, okay, maybe this person's not right for me. It can happen. And sometimes I do have those discussions with some of my clients, and I tell them, just wait out the storm. Don't make any rash decisions at the moment, unless it's super toxic.
Mm-hmm.
But you're in a little bit of a different headspace at the moment. You're going through something you haven't gone through before. They're trying to help you through something that they haven't gone through before either. Evaluate it post things getting back to some kind of normality, and then go from there. No rash decisions unless something's super toxic.
The other thing that I think can be beneficial to help, like, even if you do have kids or if it was just you and a partner, I think one thing that I've always done is as soon as I finish prep, we'll literally the week after, we get on a plane, we're overseas, we'll go to Bali, whatever. I think having a holiday or some time away where you're not bodybuilding, but you can just go back to being just a couple or a family together so that they also know that obviously you understand that they've made a sacrifice. So we're going to go and have a really nice holiday together as a couple or as a family. And this is a way that I understand you guys have been there for me. So we're going to have 2 weeks or whatever it is. We're going to enjoy, blah, blah, blah. We're not going to worry about macros and training and comps, and that you can just get back to some normal life and just they can feel that love and appreciation and have that time with you. Because the other thing is as well, bodybuilding, especially at the back end, it can be very time restrictive because you got to prep food, you got to train, maybe you got to do cardio on steps. So that's also something that I think, I know for us, it's always really, really helped. So.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. So similar, we were talking about ourselves a little bit and how we deal with certain things during prep. And a question came up of, do you struggle prepping competitors while you're prepping yourself? And how do you ensure your glass is full at the same time?
You're primed to answer this, bro.
Yeah, I guess with me is firstly, you've got to love what you do, and you've got to want to spend the energy in your business and doing what you're doing, which I love what I do. I love helping people. I love coaching. I love seeing people smash their goals. So me giving to my clients is almost like giving to myself because I enjoy it. So it's something that I'm happy to do it, and I love doing it. But yes, that you have to protect your own time and your own energy sometimes and fill your glass back up. So I know, and you might, if people follow me on social media, they'll see that I go and get massages done and go to a float tank, and I'll do things that are outside of prep. I'll do, prep, non-prep related activities or prep friendly activities. Sundays are always spent with family and friends, and my clients would know, unless it's an absolute emergency, I'm never going to answer one of their questions or check social media during that time. So you've got to protect your own time, your own energy. Don't let people unnecessarily take advantage of that, and that you do fill your glass back up. You do things for yourself, things that you enjoy that maybe aren't prep related or are prep related, because you want to make sure that you are making the most of your own prep and you're not feeling resentful of people sucking your time and taking you away from things that you love to do. So protect your time, set activities that maybe aren't prep related, and do things that you enjoy too, and make sure that you recharge your glass by also people filling it up for you, going to see family and friends, getting some energy off them and them giving you some motivation or giving you back some love too. So give love to yourself. Let other people allow you to give some love to. Don't isolate yourself from everyone, and make sure you give back. And if you are a coach like we are, and you love what you do, I don't see it as a really, really something that we need to make sure that we step away from all the time, because I love coaching. I love dealing with clients. I love talking to people. I love helping people. So it's not really draining so much from my glass, even though it does. And I need to make sure that, I do top it up, and I need to be aware of that too.
Yeah, well said. I agree. I think, if you're truly passionate and you love the sport, for me, and, I'm very fortunate to say this, I definitely don't feel like any day is a chore at the moment doing what I do. And that's the same in prep. If anything, in prep, I get so hyper-focused that I can fit so much into my day when I'm prepping that there's probably periods where I give maybe a little bit more. Now, if you ask maybe some of my clients in the back end, maybe they pick up some things like, maybe I'm not walking around as much during the session because I've got fucking Scott on my shoulder, like, sit the fuck down, stop moving. But maybe I'm not moving as much during a session, or maybe if anyone's seen me coach face to face, I yell and I scream and I get really excited about it. Maybe that backs off a little bit, but I think like completing the work is never an issue, whether it's through prep or off season. And that's just down to, the fact that I definitely love what I do. And that's why, same as you, like, I don't feel like it drains the cup in any ways, but I have a lot of things that I do that, help me to fill my cup back up. And it's obviously spending time with me, with the dog. My training sessions do that for me. My 1.5 hours to myself every day, in prep and in off season, fill my cup right back up. I love it so much. So I think if your passion's there, it shouldn't be a problem to coach someone whilst you're going through prep yourself. Now, can it be a little bit more difficult on show day if you've got 5 athletes and you're competing yourself? Maybe. But again, you're going to have systems and support systems in place to help you with that. And MT, you're going to have to deal with that yourself, in the not too distant future. And you've already, set plans in place to deal with that. So maybe there's a potential where it could get a little bit more difficult, but the ongoing process of coaching through prep, I don't think it changes anything.
Yeah. Scotty, anything?
Everything. I think you boys have covered it. I'm on the exact same page across all of it. Yep.
Whilst we're talking about this, I guess the next question was, what's some of the big life lessons you've learned from bodybuilding? Maybe Scotty, you can give that one a go.
Good on.
I think the biggest thing that bodybuilding has taught me, or not so much taught, it's probably more just reinforced that obviously if you are consistent and you do the work day in, day out, that eventually the result just takes care of itself. And I apply that philosophy to everything. You know, if you have one day and it doesn't go well, you don't just throw in, you throw your toys out of the cot and you just give up. It's the same in business, same with your relationships, with everything. I think just to be consistent and to do the work, and in doing so, again, I'm a big believer that the result just takes care of itself. But bodybuilding's given me structure, it's given me a career, and it gives me purpose in my day. Like it's not an arduous task for me to go and train. It's not an arduous task for me to program what I'm going to do for myself or for clients or what I'm going to eat, because I genuinely love it. So you're living in a sport and in a lifestyle that I couldn't think of doing anything else. So I suppose it's not to sound too deep, but it's filled a part of me up, and it allows me to be who I am. It's probably the easiest way to simplify it.
Yeah, I think for me, like, it's just, taught me to not so much always feel like I have to go for the big goal, and it's a patience game. This is not just the bodybuilding, but it's everything in life. And now I just focus on trying to add little incremental wins to everything that I do, and before you know it, time passes and you've achieved this massive thing. So just for me, just to set small goals and big goals, and just make sure that I'm just trying to get a tiny bit better.
Yeah. I actually resonate with everything that you guys said. You know, bodybuilding, to be successful at bodybuilding or anything in life, it requires consistency, patience, perseverance, discipline, motivation. It requires all those things. It requires you to go through hard times when you need to push and actually get out of your comfort zone, and to struggle to succeed.
Yeah.
That's just anything. Imagine if you're trying to buy a house, if you're trying to start a business, if you're trying to anything in life, it resonates. And that's why it's so funny is doing a bodybuilding show is not just about the physique that you build, but it's about all the lessons you learn and how that translates to other things in your life, and will allow you to be better at other things in your life and more successful at other things in your life, because you're forced to utilize all those things. Whereas if you're like, oh, I want to earn a bit more money, maybe I'll get a better job, you can delay that for a little bit if you wanted to. So it's too hard, I'm not going to be disciplined enough, sacrifice enough. But bodybuilding, you've set something in stone, and there's an impending date where you're going to be judged. So it forces you, and then also you probably have a coach that's going to keep you accountable too, right? So it forces you to learn those life lessons. So everyone, get into bodybuilding. It's the best thing you could ever do in your life.
Yeah, and sometimes you just got to just start it, right? Like we spoke about this podcast, and I messaged you guys yesterday. I'm like, boys, tomorrow's the 12th episode, right? So without even realizing it, you're 12 episodes deep, and it was just because we made the decision to start it, and we just have not missed a week with an episode. So just doing the little things and doing them consistently, and all of a sudden you get to this place where you're like, wow, how did we end up here?
All right, let's change the pace a little bit. Let's go into some nutrition-related questions. So macro timing around training. Now, we may have covered this a little bit, but let's just make sure we've checked this one off the box. Do you guys train fasted or fed? What should you eat pre or post-workout? Is pre-workout meal selection important so that you don't crash during your sessions? What do you reckon, Scotty?
Yeah, firstly, peri-workout nutrition, so referring to the meal before, intra-workout and after, is very important because it ultimately is going to determine how your session goes. So in terms of should you train fasted, you could if you wanted to. It's probably not going to be as optimal. I would at least want to be training. I'd want to have something small before I train, or at least be training with some EAA so that you can at least get a muscle protein synthesis spike. But essentially, the food that you consume, typically, if it's training, your pre-training meal and your post-training meal are going to have some carbohydrate. The meal before you train is probably the most important because ultimately it's going to determine how your session goes. Having said that, if you're someone like I've got clients that are shift workers and they have to train at 4 a.m., it's not ideal for them to eat 100 grams of oats at 3 a.m. So we just backload the night before. They essentially have a really high carbohydrate meal. They'll sip on some aminos. They might have some, 2 rice cakes with honey before they train, and it's fine. That carbohydrate you consume the night before does the job. But essentially, you just want to try and have a protein feeding before and after you train within, ideally, an hour either side. Obviously, net protein balance is what's most important, but typically, again, to get an MPS spike and to elongate that spike when you pair it with resistance training, you want to have it an hour either side. Carbohydrates, obviously, beforehand, a little bit of carbohydrate afterwards, depends what you got to play with. And that's pretty much it. I wouldn't be having a ton of fiber or a heap of fat before I train because, again, it's going to slow digestion and you're going to feel a bit sluggish. But they're probably, the main things, and just making sure that you're having at least 3, ideally 4 protein feedings a day. And if you do that and you're consistent, you'll make gains.
Yeah, you covered it, man. Like, I really couldn't add much to it. It's all around performance, and that's kind of individual, whether you need to train before, whether you need to eat before or not. And then it's about, making sure that you maintain your gains. Yeah,
absolutely. I think the old myth of like, I've got to have my shake within 15 minutes of my session, or I don't get any of the gains. I think there's we've dispelled that, which is good. And the other thing around fiber, which Scotty said, is if you've got a big leg day and you have a massive fibrous meal and you've got a couple hundred kgs on that leg press, we've all heard it at a commercial gym. Don't be surprised if you're setting yourself up to pop off in the middle of the
gym. Next one was calorie counting versus meal plan. We've covered that in a previous episode, so check the descriptions of previous episodes. It's definitely been covered. Using gum for hunger. We've covered that up in the last episode. The next one is how much protein can be absorbed in one sitting, like 40 grams of protein in a meal. Can all 40 be absorbed, or is it wasted? Go, Scotty. You're always good at these ones.
So again, I feel like there's a lot of, I don't think the word wasted is right. So firstly, we know that around about 20 grams is going to be enough to get a muscle protein synthesis spike, provided it's a complete protein source, so it's got leucine. But essentially, it would depend on what that meal is consumed with. So if you're having an isolated protein source, so it was just a shake or amino acids on their own, then that's going to be a little bit different because we know that if you consume protein with, say, some carbohydrate or some fats, that's obviously going to slow down that rate of digestion. So sure, you're going to uptake 30 to 40 grams depending on the person. So everyone individually and depending on the size of the human being is going to be factorial as well. But essentially, you're not wasting it because, like, say for example, my last protein feeding was about 65 grams of protein after I train. If my body's only utilizing, say, 35 or 40 of that straight away as it needs it, does that mean that I'm wasting the rest of it? No, it doesn't, because there's also some carbohydrate that I consume with that, and there's also a little bit of peanut butter, so there's a little bit of fat. So what that does is it slows that rate of absorption down a little bit, which can also, I would argue, that it would keep you in more of an anabolic state for longer because you're not breaking down protein as actively as you would be if you had consumed less. So obviously we know that how we gain muscle is that you need to be in a positive balance versus a negative. So you need to basically create more protein than you do break down. And if you do that, you're going to build more muscle tissue. So, and I think there actually was, I can't remember when it was, but there was a study, I saw it ages ago. It was something about they had a group of people consume, I think it was like 40 grams and like 80 grams or something. And then they took bloods afterwards. And so one group had it with a heap of, I think they both had it with fats. Anyway, to surmise it, basically the group that consumed it with a higher protein feeding, they had higher levels of anabolism, which again, I would assume that was as a result of breaking down less protein than obviously they would if you're only having a smaller protein feeding. So to summarize it, I don't think that 40 grams is the holy grail. If you're consuming 60, that's completely fine. If you're only having, say, 180 grams or 150 grams for the day, I don't think that you should just split it into 2 meals. Like essentially, let's say that for easy math that you are having 160 grams, 4 40-gram feedings is going to be the most optimal, because each of those feedings, say they're 4 hours apart, every time you're having that, you're getting a spike in muscle protein synthesis, versus if you have 2 feedings at 80 grams. So obviously 4 smaller feedings is going to be optimal, but no, essentially you're not wasting that protein. You just want to be breaking down. And again, if you're consuming it with carbohydrate and some fats, then your rate of absorption is going to be a little bit slower.
Yeah, love it. Like, so in summary, you will absorb it all. You may not use it all at once.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that you split up your protein servings enough frequently throughout the day.
Yeah. And basically, like, I wouldn't, if you're going to have 80 grams of protein via chicken breast and you're not going to have any carbohydrate with it, are you wasting it? You're not wasting it, but you're definitely not going to utilize it as well if you were to have 80 grams of that, but you also had some carbohydrate or some fats with that meal, because that will at least slow it down and it will be absorbed a little bit slower. So is it going to be as optimal as we said, 4 feedings? No, but yeah, essentially just space it out as you need to, but I wouldn't get caught up on the holy grail of 35 to 40 grams is the bare minimum.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next one. Glute ham tie-ins. So I know you can't spot reduce, but is there any tips of getting rid of stubborn body fat in the glute ham tie-in area for females? What do you reckon, MG?
Man, I think the answer is unfortunately not what people want to hear, but it's that you probably just need to diet a little bit harder. Doesn't mean that you're not dieting hard already. What I mean is you probably need a little bit more time. It will come off eventually, but no, you can't sort of, doing an extra 3 set of banded abductions at the end of your upper day as you're getting 4 weeks out from your show is probably not going to increase the fat burn on the area. It's probably just, a genetic thing, and it's super common with a lot of female athletes that, we see upper body leanness come in sooner. I would say it's a greater percentage that I see this upper body fat levels reduce sooner, and then, they're a little more stubborn in the lower region, but it's more just a timing issue, and you probably just need a little bit more time in the deficit to force the body to liberate that tissue. So
I totally agree. And I think also depends on too is you need a level of development there too.
Yeah.
So that when you do strip off the fat, you actually have some shape there, because you'll see that someone that's heavily developed in that area probably doesn't need to get as lean to show that area off, if that makes sense.
Yep, absolutely.
So I think there's a two parts there is generally, do you need to get lean in that area, or do you need to get lean and more developed in that area too? So, and we could go down a rabbit hole of exercises to help that, but maybe someone can ask that question in the next podcast, if you're listening. What do you reckon, Scotty? Anything to add there?
Nah, there's not much. You guys have covered it. It's the way it is, unfortunately. There's no magic formula or creams or fat burners.
The creams.
All right. So,
but Ronnie used the creams, man. Ronnie used the creams.
Ronnie did, yeah. 6-pack abs or jacked calves?
Oh man, let me take this one at the start. I can get 6-pack abs once or twice a year. I will never have jacked calves in my life. I will pick jacked calves. I just want to know what it feels like, man, to have jacked calves. I just want someone to say to me, "Fuck, man, how did you fucking get those?" That'll never happen to me. I take calves.
You always want what you can't have, eh?
For sure.
Yep. What's the last song you listened to on Spotify? Should be the Prep Coast podcast, everyone. Should be their answer.
Yeah.
Mine was All Me by Drake.
If you could have one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Pasta. Buddy.
Do you want me to go?
Yeah.
Honestly, as lame as it sounds, probably chicken and rice, because it's what I have every day anyway. And honestly, I don't get
with AM light sweet chili sauce.
The full fat sauce.
The
full sugar sauce, I should say. But there's so many different ways that you can do that. But I could, if it was pasta, I could do pasta or chicken and rice. But it'll be one of those two. I don't really care. I like both of them. I could do either.
Can I just say one thing just before? I got multiple messages this week from last week's podcast. People commenting on Scott's usage of AM light sweet chili sauce. I'm getting just as many messages about that as questions for the podcast.
I can't find it anywhere.
Yeah, because everyone
It's because everyone buys it, man.
I can't
Do you know
find
what
you.
you can? You know what you can find? You can find the full sugar one because I went to stock up on the other day,
Yeah.
and the left of it is the light one, and there's two of the things that they come in and they're empty, and then no one's even touched any of the full sugar one. So
I'm going to be a bit cheeky with this question, the answer, because it says meal, and I'm going to say breakfast. Because I love breakfast. So if I was to have only one meal for the rest of my life, I'd love to have breakfast every single day for every single meal.
Oh, I
Okay.
like it. Now, can you tell us what your prep breakfast is?
So protein pancake or some kind of omelette is awesome. Otherwise, yeah, that's kind of my go-to at the moment. Something with eggs. Whether it's if I was having more calories with like bacon and eggs, eggs on toast, eggs. You know, obviously, you know, egg whites in making a pancake. It'd be something egg related for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. All right, let's finish this off with giving some other coaches some advice. All right, as our last one. Number one advice for starting out in the fitness coaching space: face-to-face versus online.
Yeah, I would say I know that the desirable thing is like to just be online. You don't have to be face to face, trading, physical hours with someone versus being able to do it from your home. And sure, for a lot of people, that is the goal and that is the dream. Unless you've got a really big online presence or social media presence, to start that way for most people is just not going to be achievable. So I think the transition is generally that, you start in a facility, face to face, build a network, build a little bit of credibility in your results and your ability to produce results from clients, and whether that be comp related or lifestyle, it doesn't really matter. But I think having a resume of results is certainly the first step that I would set out to achieve. So transformation photos. For me, I'm sure Scott is the same. Like, I love the face-to-face, and me and MT talk about this all the time about, how you're going to reduce hours. And, reducing hours is something that is on the cards, but, I don't think I would ever want to lose the face-to-face aspect, because for my personality, I thrive on it and I love it. And that's how I feel fulfilled in myself as a coach. But I think if you're looking to start out and your goal is to get into the online space and be an online coach, my advice would be start face-to-face, build a resume of results, and then use that to eventually take yourself online.
Yeah, I agree. I think as well, I think you can be a really good face-to-face coach and you could be an average online coach, and vice versa, because they're both very, very different, and you need to have a different skill set. You've got to have your systems in place so that you can still convey the messages and have the dialogue that you need to have to still get the result you need to have. I think since the pandemic, I feel like the fitness community is probably a lot more receptive to online coaching than perhaps they once were. Like, I can say before the lockdown, I was working with maybe 12 people online, and that number's like 3x from where it was in 2 years, because it's just the way that it kind of went, and it forced a lot of people to go down that path. But similar to you, I enjoy the face-to-face element of it. I don't think I'd be able to do like 50 sessions a week like I used to. I have had to cut that back, and again, part of having a family and also having a full book online. But I like having a mixed blend. I think it also depends. When you're first starting out, if you want to solely end up being an online coach, I don't think that you can just say I'm an online coach. As you just said, you need to be in a gym, you need to have the practical experience, you need to learn, and you need to do your time. I feel like there's so many young people that get into this industry, they feel that the world owes them a living. I'm going to charge $100 a week for online coaching. You've really got no background, you haven't done your due diligence, and you just haven't done your time. It doesn't work like that. I feel like a lot of people, and some of the young coaches that I mentor and work with, they'll say, I want to be at the stage you're at. And I'm like, that's cool, man. Just spend 15 years, do your time, work shit hours, pay your dues. But you also need to have some really good mentors. I think every trainer early on, you need to have a good mentors. And if you want to be an online coach, I would say you should be working with an online coach, the best person that you know, because you'll essentially learn a lot from them via them mentoring you, but also the way in which they do things, how they do things, what you like about what they do, perhaps what you don't like what could be your point of difference. So I think you need to work in a gym, you need to do your time, and I think you need to have a mentor, or ideally mentors, people that you can work under to learn your craft and to figure out who you want to be and what your point of difference is going to be. Because there's so many people in this industry now, and yet there's a huge piece of the pie. There's plenty of clients to go around for everyone, but essentially you just got to find why would someone want to go to you versus going to Michael Trimboli or to Michael Galani?
Yeah, I think from a practical standpoint, it depends on what your stream of income is first. So if you already have a job and you want to become a PT, are you able to take the leap of having a salary to having nothing whilst you build that up? If you can't do that, then you need to start some kind of online coaching first to build up your kind of clientele base and then flip into face-to-face. If you're just starting out of uni, or you're living at home, or you're getting financially supported somehow, then you can go straight to face-to-face and work your income up, right? But I think that you can't be a good online coach without having been or being a good face-to-face coach.
Yeah.
And then you can't be a good face-to-face coach which transforms people's bodies unless you know how to online coach properly too. Because face-to-face, if you're trying to transform someone, you need to know how to program, you need to know how to monitor them and how to communicate with them. If you're only ever communicating and monitoring within your face-to-face session, that's not enough. So I think you need to, ideally you're going to have a blend of both, and then you're going to specialize. But I think you definitely need to know how to do both before you specialize. And you do what MG said, do which one you enjoy most, and then stick with that. And then if you want to increase your income somehow, there's going to be a component of, I'm running out a certain amount of hours. I want to keep face-to-face because I enjoy it, but I need to ramp up my online because I want to earn more money, because I can do more online than I can in a face-to-face. You know, I can service more clients online than I can in a 60-minute face-to-face session. So I think you need to do both. And I think then you need to specialize post that point. And it depends on which one you start with, will depend on what your income stream needs to be right at the start.
Yeah.
And I will say, just because there's a lot of online coaches that work with physique athletes, if you're new to this space, in my opinion, you don't have any right working with a physique competitor if they're a first timer, especially a female, if you don't know what you're doing. So if you haven't been to uni, or you haven't done your time within this space, and you don't understand the physiology side of it, and you don't understand the repercussions of, like, anyone can dish out, here's your macros, go ham, sweet. But if you don't know how to manage people, and you don't know how to make the right adjustments at the right time, and all of those bits and pieces that come with the territory, then stay out of this scope, because there still is people who are involved purely for monetary gain. And we all see it from time to time. Fortunately, not as much now, because there are quite a lot of good coaches out there, but there still are people that are in this space that shouldn't be, because they don't have the skill set or the education to be going down that path. So, yeah.
And sometimes it's good to have those coaches because they keep us employed, because those clients come to us.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to get to that point. But
yeah,
firstly, like, again, do your time, get your education that you need to get, perhaps even go through a prep yourself, work with a credible coach so that you can, again, learn that process. And then once you've done that, then maybe that you can look at working with someone. But don't just think that, wow, it looks like there might be a lot of money in this space, so I'm going to dive into there, because you've got no place being there if you haven't done your time and if you haven't got all your ducks in a line.
Awesome. All right, boys. Love it. Let's leave it there.
Good chat, boys.
So much for your
And
time.
just want to also say,
questions.
hey, we want to thank Scott and I. We just want to say thanks to you, man, because for those of you who wouldn't know this, Trimboli's doing, all the tech work in the back end, uploading, editing, doing all this, and obviously he's prepping and, has a massive roster of clients too, man. So just a big thanks for helping us put this out there, because obviously you're doing a lot of work behind the scenes, man.
Yeah, we really appreciate it, bro.
I love it. I love it, boys. Let's keep it going. Can't wait for the next one.
See you all next weekend,
and we'll chat soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.